They mocked the foxwoman's ears, but I fell in love with their enchanting beauty. The encounter at the Riverside Market. The evening sun painted the Riverside Market in shades of amber and rose as Darian Reed made his way through the crowded stalls. After a long day organizing ancient manuscripts at the city library, he craved the simple pleasure of fresh fruit and the warm chaos of human voices. The air smelled of grilled corn, sweet melon, and the muddy richness of the river itself. He paused at a fruit stand run by 3 unusual vendors. The woman, Venna, had an odd way of tilting her head when customers spoke, as if translating their words into another language entirely. Her companions, Keyleth and Tross, seemed more interested in watching the crowd than making sales, their eyes tracking movements with scientific precision. "Just observing human social patterns," Venna said when Darian asked if they were new to the city. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "People are fascinating, don't you think?" Before Darian could answer, harsh laughter erupted nearby. A cluster of teenagers had surrounded a young woman trying to buy sunflowers from an elderly vendor. The woman wore a heavy shawl despite the warm evening, but it couldn't hide the delicate, feathered antennae that rose from her temples. Soft and pale as moonlight, they trembled with each cruel word thrown at her. "Look at the bug girl," one teenager sneered. "Those things on her head are disgusting." The woman, Emira, though Darian didn't know her name yet, kept her eyes down, coins shaking in her palm. The flower vendor looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Most passers-by glanced at the scene and hurried away, unwilling to get involved. Darian felt something tighten in his chest. He'd spent his whole life watching people be cruel to anything different, and he'd always hated his own silence in those moments. Not this time. He walked directly to Emira's side, his presence causing the teenagers to step back slightly. "Excuse me," he said gently to Emira, ignoring the mockers entirely. "I couldn't help but notice how beautifully your antennae catch the light. They shimmer like pearl dust." Emira's head snapped up, her eyes, large and luminous, adapted for seeing in darkness, widening in shock. No one had ever called any part of her beautiful before. The teenagers muttered something under their breath and drifted away. The moment deflated without an audience. You don't think they're strange?" Emira whispered, her voice soft as moth wings against glass. Darian smiled. "I think they're extraordinary. I'm Darian, by the way." For the first time in months, Emira smiled back. Her antennae, which had been pressed flat against her head in fear, slowly lifted, their tips glowing faintly in the fading light. From their fruit stand, the 3 alien observers watched intently, already recording this interaction as something worth studying: coffee and conversations. 3 days passed before Darian returned to the Riverside Market, though he'd thought about Emira constantly. He told himself he was just being friendly, but his heart knew better. When he spotted her sitting alone by the stone fountain, wrapped in layers despite the mild weather, relief flooded through him. She noticed him approaching and her antennae perked up slightly, a gesture he was learning meant surprise or pleasure. "You came back," she said, as if people usually didn't. "I was hoping I'd see you again," Darian admitted. "There's a quiet cafe near here, just a few blocks away. The owner is kind, and they make the best cardamom coffee in the city. Would you like to join me?" Emira hesitated, her fingers clutching the shawl tighter. "People stare." "Then let them stare," Darian said softly. "I'll be looking at you anyway." The cafe was tucked down a narrow street, its windows fogged with steam. The owner, an elderly woman with gentle eyes, smiled at them both without a trace of judgment. They settled into a corner booth, and Darian ordered 2 coffees and a plate of honey pastries. As they talked, Emira slowly relaxed. She told him about arriving in the city 6 months ago, hoping to find work as a textile artist. Her people had an extraordinary sense of color and pattern. But every interview ended the same way: polite interest until she removed her hood, then sudden unavailability. "I tried hiding completely," she said, her antennae drooping. "But they always ask me to remove any headwear for identification. And then they see." Darian listened, anger simmering at the injustice of it. "Their loss," he said. "Any company would be lucky to have someone with your eye for beauty." "You barely know me," Emira said, but she was smiling. "Then let me know you better," Darian replied. He shared his own stories, How he'd always felt invisible, the quiet kid who preferred books to people, who'd never quite fit anywhere until he found his place among old manuscripts and forgotten stories. "I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't belong," he said. "Maybe that's why I recognize loneliness in others." Emira reached across the table, her hand hovering near his. When he took it gently, her antennae glowed soft pink, a blush, he realized. Outside the cafe window, Venna stood with her companions, pretending to examine a shop display. "Interesting," she murmured into her hidden recording device. "Subject exhibits genuine attraction to physical features other humans reject. Emotional connection forming rapidly." Inside, Darian and Emira talked until the cafe owner politely mentioned closing time. As they walked toward the fountain where they'd met, Emira let her shawl slip slightly. In the lamplight, Darian glimpsed the edges of something folded against her back, delicate, translucent structures that caught light like stained glass. "Are those?" he began. Emira quickly covered them again. "Wings," she whispered. "I know they're. Can I see them someday?" Darian interrupted. "When you're ready. I have a feeling they're as beautiful as everything else about you." Emira's antennae glowed brighter, and for the first time since coming to this city, she felt something dangerous and wonderful: hope. The garden where she could breathe. The botanical garden occupied 5 acres on the city's eastern edge, a place most residents had forgotten. Darian had discovered it during his university years, a sanctuary where ancient trees grew thick enough to block out the world, where night-blooming flowers opened their petals to moonlight instead of judgment. He'd asked Emira to meet him there on a Friday evening, promising her a place where she could breathe without fear. She arrived wrapped as always, but her antennae trembled with anticipation rather than anxiety. "It's beautiful," she whispered as they walked past banks of jasmine and moonflower. The air was heavy with perfume, and somewhere in the darkness, a nightingale sang. They reached a small clearing surrounded by tall hedges, private, hidden, safe. Paper lanterns hung from branches, their warm light creating a cocoon of intimacy. Darian had spent his lunch hour setting this up, wanting everything to be perfect. "I thought you might like a place where you didn't have to hide," he said quietly. Emira's eyes filled with tears. Slowly, with trembling hands, she unwrapped her shawl. Then she reached back and released the clasps that held her wings folded tight against her body. They unfurled like silk banners catching wind, translucent membranes stretching between delicate veins, patterns of pearl and lavender and soft gold that seemed to hold captured moonlight. They were easily 6 feet across, and when she moved them slightly, they whispered like pages turning in an ancient book. Darian forgot to breathe. "They're supposed to be for flight," Emira said, her voice barely audible. "But my people lost that ability generations ago. Now they're just something else for people to mock." "Emira," Darian breathed, stepping closer. "They're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingertips brushed the edge of one wing. It was softer than rose petals, warm with her body heat, and it shimmered at his touch. "You really mean that?" Emira said, reading the wonder in his face. "Every word," Darian whispered. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You're not something to hide. You're something to celebrate." When he kissed her, it was soft and searching, a question and an answer at once. Emira's wings trembled, then wrapped partially around them both, creating a private world where only they existed. Her antennae glowed brilliant rose gold, and Darian felt her smile against his lips. They sank down onto the soft grass, surrounded by night-blooming flowers. Darian traced the patterns on her wings while she ran her fingers through his hair, both of them learning the landscape of each other. When he kissed the base of her antennae, she gasped. They were sensitive, she explained shyly, connected to every nerve in her body. "Then I'll be gentle," he promised, and proceeded to worship every part of her that the world had taught her to hate. High in a nearby tree, Keyleth adjusted his observation equipment. "Remarkable," he transmitted to his companions. "Physical intimacy achieved through celebration of difference rather than despite it. This changes our entire understanding of human pair bonding." But Darian and Emira were beyond observation now, lost in each other, discovering that love could be both fierce and tender, that desire could bloom from acceptance, that the body becomes sacred when someone truly sees it. When doubt crept in. For 3 weeks, Darian and Emira existed in a bubble of happiness. They met every evening, sometimes at the botanical garden, sometimes at Darian's small apartment where she could move freely without her shawl, her wings catching lamplight as they cooked dinner together or read poetry aloud. But happiness, Emira had learned, was fragile. It shattered on a Tuesday evening when Darian convinced her to try a new restaurant downtown. "Just once," he'd said. "I want to take you somewhere nice, somewhere we can be a normal couple." Emira wore her shawl, but her antennae were visible. She'd been trying to be braver, to believe in Darian's words about not hiding. The hostess seated them without comment, but Emira felt eyes following them across the dining room. The whispers started before their water arrived. "Did you see those things on her head? How can he stand to be with something like that? Probably pays her. You know, those kinds of relationships." Emira's antennae pressed flat against her skull. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't open her menu. Across the table, Darian's jaw tightened with fury, but Emira spoke before he could. "I want to leave," she whispered. They left their table, walked past the staring faces, past the hostess who wouldn't meet their eyes. Darian held Emira's hand the entire way, but she felt the weight of every gaze like stones against her back. She didn't answer his calls for 2 days. When Darian finally showed up at her tiny studio apartment, he found her curled on her bed, wings wrapped around herself like a cocoon. The room was dark, curtains drawn against the world. "Emira, please talk to me," he said softly, sitting on the floor beside her bed. "You should be with someone normal," she said, her voice muffled. "Someone who doesn't make people whisper. Someone who doesn't embarrass you." "Embarrass me?" Darian's voice cracked. "Emira, look at me." She slowly turned, her eyes red from crying. Her antennae barely moved, drained of their usual glow. Darian took her hand, pressing it against his chest where his heart hammered. "Do you feel that? That's what happens every time I see you. Not embarrassment. Not shame. Wonder. Joy. Love. But people. People are cruel to anything different," Darian interrupted. "Do you know how many years I spent invisible? I was too quiet, too bookish, too strange. I learned to make myself small so people wouldn't notice me enough to hurt me. And then I met you." He moved to sit beside her on the bed, his arm around her trembling shoulders. "You're the first person who ever made me want to be seen. Because when I'm with you, I'm not the invisible library clerk. I'm someone brave enough to love the most extraordinary person I've ever met." Emira leaned into him, tears soaking his shirt. "I'm so tired of being strong." "Then let me be strong for both of us," Darian whispered. He kissed her forehead, her closed eyelids, the base of her antennae. "I see you, Emira. Really see you. Your kindness, your talent, your courage. The way your wings catch light like cathedral windows. The way your antennae glow when you laugh. You're not something I tolerate. You're everything I've been looking for." She pulled back to look at him, searching his face for any trace of pity or doubt. She found only fierce tenderness. "I love you," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I love you too," Darian replied. "Every different, extraordinary, beautiful part of you." They held each other as darkness fell outside, Emira's wings slowly unfurling to wrap around them both. In that embrace, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this love. That being different didn't mean being less. That the right person wouldn't just accept her, they would treasure her. Outside, Venna watched from across the street, making her final notes. "Conclusion," she recorded quietly. "Love requires not just attraction, but the courage to defend that love against a hostile world. Subject Darian demonstrates this capacity. Relationship prognosis, strong. Love that transforms the world." 6 months later, spring had transformed the Riverside Market into a celebration of color. Flower vendors displayed roses and peonies, children chased each other between stalls, and the air hummed with life and possibility. Darian and Emira walked through the crowd hand in hand, her wings visible beneath a sheer vest she designed herself, gossamer fabric that complemented rather than hid her natural beauty. Her antennae, no longer pressed flat in fear, swayed gently as she walked, their tips glowing soft amber in the afternoon sun. People still stared. Some still whispered. But something had changed. "Look," a little girl said to her mother, pointing at Emira's wings. "She's like a fairy princess." The mother smiled. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Emira's antennae brightened to gold. Darian squeezed her hand. They stopped at the fruit stand where they'd first met, but Keyleth, Venna, and Tross were packing their belongings. "Heading home," Venna explained, though her smile was warmer than it had been months ago. "Our research is complete." "What kind of research?" Emira asked curiously. "Human capacity for love," Keyleth answered, glancing at Darian. "Specifically, whether humans could choose compassion over cruelty when faced with difference. The data was inconclusive until we met you two." Darian frowned. "You were studying us." "Observing," Tross corrected. "And learning. You taught us something important, that love doesn't require sameness. It requires someone brave enough to see beauty where others see strangeness, to stand beside someone when the world is unkind." Venna handed Emira a small package. "A gift. From 3 strangers who learned about humanity by watching you both choose each other." Inside was a delicate silver chain with a pendant shaped like a moth in flight, wings spread, antennae raised, captured in a moment of perfect freedom. After the vendors left, Darian fastened the necklace around Emira's neck. They continued through the market, stopping to buy sunflowers from the same elderly vendor who'd witnessed their first meeting. "You two have been good for this place," the vendor said, wrapping the flowers in brown paper. "Lately, I've seen more people like your lady, folks who look different, coming to the market. They see you here, happy and together, and they think maybe they can be happy too." Emira's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were joyful. That evening, they returned to the botanical garden where they'd first kissed. The jasmine was in full bloom, and moonlight filtered through the trees like silver rain. Emira spread her wings fully, and Darian wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, his cheek resting against her shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For teaching me that I was never the problem. That being different isn't something to fix or hide. That the right love doesn't ask you to be smaller, it celebrates everything that makes you exactly who you are." Darian turned her gently to face him, his hands cupping her face as her antennae glowed brilliant rose gold. "You taught me the same thing. That loving you made me braver, kinder, more myself than I've ever been." When they kissed, her wings caught moonlight and scattered it in patterns of pearl and lavender across the garden floor, like stained glass windows casting sacred light. They had both been lonely, both been hurt by a world that feared difference. But they had found each other in that loneliness, and in choosing to love, fiercely, publicly, without apology, they had transformed not just themselves, but the small corner of the world they inhabited. Because love, real love, doesn't just change two hearts. It changes everyone who witnesses it, reminding them that beauty exists in unexpected places, that courage can be quiet, that the most extraordinary connections bloom when someone simply chooses to see. Lessons. True love begins not when someone overlooks your differences, but when they celebrate the very things that make you unique and extraordinary. The courage to stand beside someone when the world is unkind transforms both the lover and the beloved, proving that compassion is stronger than cruelty. We are never too different to deserve love. We are only waiting for someone brave enough to see the beauty in what makes us unlike anyone else. The most profound act of love is teaching someone that they were never the problem, that their authentic self is not something to hide but something sacred worth protecting and treasuring.